Welcome to Walking with Spirit with Dr. Ruth Anderson on the International Angels Network and Enlightened World Network. I'm your host, Ruth Anderson, and I'm coming to you from Colorado. This show has been pre-recorded, so we can't take any callers. Here at International Angels Network, we explore spirituality, angels, spirit guides, our loved ones on the other side, and much more. Our radio podcasts are available to you on Pocket Casts, Pinterest, Player FM, Podchaser, and now Overcast Radio. Listen to us on Alexa and Echo Amazon devices, or download the TuneIn app. These are all easy sites to use and make it simple to listen to our archive shows. This episode of International Angels Network is sponsored by Holistic Light Rejuvenation Center. For more information, visit holisticrejuvenate.com. Sunday Sturgeon is the founder and CEO of Holistic Light Rejuvenation Center and is a host on our network. I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen in. This show is called Walking with Spirit. Walking with Spirit means consciously living in the physical realm with frequent connection to the divinity in the spirit realm and being open to all that they want me to experience. Every day I check in with my guides, Divine Mother and God, sometimes seeking guidance, sometimes seeking connection, and sometimes seeking their healing abilities. Many days I receive lessons by hearing, seeing, or feeling signs coming in from the energetic realm. I never know what my day is going to look like or what the next learning might be. I'm an author and a spiritual counselor, providing individualized, transformational experiences for my clients using holy fire Reiki, energy work, and connection with the spiritual divinity, including the Divine Mother, Archangels Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Tonight's show is the first of our 3-week mini-series called Healing from Abuse, A Road to Recovery. This mini-series is a gift of the heart. The idea for these shows came up a few weeks back when I was interviewing a friend and fellow lightworker, Monica Augustine. While she was sharing on the show about the work she does with Reiki, Archangel Michael impressed upon her heart that this was a safe space to speak about her history of childhood abuse at the hands of a family member. At the same time, Archangel Michael impressed on my heart that there were listeners who had been through similar situations and would welcome hearing what Monica had to share. It was then that Monica and I both heard the request from Archangel Michael that we together record a series of shows about abuse and healing. I know that this gift of love to you is requiring that Monica stretch herself and take risks, perhaps in ways that she never has before. My role is to offer her the safe space in which to do it, and I am feeling the presence of Archangel Michael next to us as we are together today. For any of you listening who have been subjected to abuse at the hands or words of another, please join us. Settle in and open your heart to feel these words and the heartfelt connection in which Monica, Archangel Michael, and I are reaching out and embracing you. These shows will be aired on Enlightened World Network's show called Stepping Into Your Power, because that is what we hope for you. That as a spiritual being having a physical existence, you are able to step into your power. So welcome to week 1 of Healing from Abuse, A Road to Recovery. This episode is called Boundaries. With that, I would like to tell you about our guest this evening, my friend and fellow lightworker, Monica Augustine. Monica's career passion is to support clients to gain clear insight, release inner blocks, and heal, so they can take positive action to experience the life they desire. She gains information by asking questions, actively listening, and using her empathic, clairaudient, and clairvoyant skills She then uses Reiki to release and clear inner blocks and life coaching to support positive action steps. Monica has training as an intuitive reader and is certified as a Reiki Master teacher and life coach. In addition, Monica founded and directed Wildflower School of Voice in Boulder, Colorado for 20 years before selling it at the end of 2014 to transition into her new work full-time. On the personal side, she's lived in Colorado for 26 years, has been married to her husband Kevin for 21 years. Together they have 2 boys, Greg and Will. Monica loves to be with her family, sing, exercise, and devote time to friends and her spiritual practice. Welcome, Monica. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth, for having me.
So, Monica, for those who didn't hear your story from the beginning on the last show, can you please let us know what abuse you were exposed to, how old you were at the time, and how that impacted you over the years?
Yeah, so Ruth, the first memories I have are my earliest memory is probably the age of 3, and it went on to probably around the age of 17, 3 to 17, and I was I had experiences of abuse sexually for a long period of time, um, and then later mentally and emotionally and physically. It was by different people. They were different people in my adults in my life that that you hope you can trust, and that's what all children look for, is to look up to somebody and feel like you can trust what they're saying, is they have your best interest at heart. And in a lot of cases that wasn't the case. But my first memories were early as 3 and 17, and that's when I got out of, moved out and started, living on my own. Um, and then it's a journey, of course, to heal all that, but at least you're out of that and into something that you can start at least to begin to create your own environment.
Wow, so 3 to 17. So really
Mhm.
all of your formative years.
Yeah, it was a long time, and it took me a long time to believe that happened. For those people that this may have happened to, um, that's the whole reason for this show, is to empower people and to let them know they're not alone, and different things that might come up, and fears and guilt, that things that just happen naturally when you're abused and your boundaries are crossed like that, especially at such an early age, because you don't really have any time really to develop healthy boundaries or healthy sense of self. Um, that can be sometimes that can be it's hard to turn that around, at all. But yeah, 3 to 17. And one thing I want to say to anyone listening to Ruth is, there were also some good memories too. It wasn't completely like terrible. It was like, you know, I had opportunities to do things, like I was a cheerleader and I was in gymnastics and track, and I went to regular school, and I had friends, and I had a roof over my head, and money wasn't really an issue of having it. It was, but and we had horses and things like that. So it was like this was throughout. It wasn't like all of it was terrible. Do you know what I mean? I
Mhm.
just want to make sure that's clear. At the same time, Ruth, there was a lot of behind the scenes, and a lot of abuse going on under that. And and first of all, as a young person, man, woman, whoever, boy, girl, you really don't want to accept that's happening. And then you also, at least for me, you don't want to think that's happening. First of all, because you don't want to think that someone you love so much is doing that, because that's confusing
Mhm.
and terrifying. And and then also you think, you wonder if all of this is normal and other children are going through this too. And then you also don't really want people to know, because when you're abused and certain messages are given to you, you think you are the one at fault. So it's a very complex situation inside the brain psyche of anybody, you know? So it was I I don't know, it was like I felt some kind of connection, even at a young age, to my higher self, because I heard things and I was hearing other, now in retrospect, looking back, I feel like it was angelic. I feel like it was spirit guided. I feel like it was something I could feel. I always felt a lot of compassion, um, even at a younger age, and empathy towards other people. But I also then was aware of my human side. And then as I got older, I definitely was angry, but also compassion was kind of confusing, conflicting.
I imagine that, plus you were relying on this person. I mean, that so many
Yeah.
different aspects of this come in on top of each other. I can see where it would be confusing.
Yeah, it was really confusing for me. And maybe too, that's different for different people, giving their makeup, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, what they're here to do in life. I don't really know all the answers, but I do know that um, different people express these types of things differently. Like I know a couple other people, that many other people, honestly, now that I don't know, more and more as I get older and I work with different people, it's amazing how many people this has happened to. And it, I used to just think, oh my gosh, I wish I would have spoke up earlier and I wouldn't have felt so alone. But it's like different people handle it different. They cope with it, manage it, and then hopefully as we get older, we really want to completely heal it. But yeah, it's a very confusing. It was very confusing for me because I wanted love from my family. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to please, and I wanted them to be happy with me, as I think most kids do. I would think most kids, you know, want to feel loved by their parents, and that's kind of where my head was more, I want to get along, I want to make people happy, I want to. It was very confusing, but then I also wanted to feel normal and not let anyone know these things were that I'm no different than anyone else, and I can do gymnastics and track and do school, and that I'm strong and like I'm normal. You know what I mean? So there's kind of a lot going on there.
Right. So, was there anyone you could tell, even anyone your own age? Or when was the first time you actually told someone?
Well, you know, um, when it comes to the mental, emotional, and physical, um, there were other people. Ruth, what I want to do is I want to keep it, kind of keep it just on me, because I don't want to bring in other people that might not want this out, that know that this happened to out there. But I'll say, you know, as I got older, I definitely remember the mental, physical, and emotional abuse. Like I remember all of that, because that was when I was a little older, like more like 10, and up to 17. Um, and there was also some sexual abuse in that time, but more the mental, emotional, physical. There were other people that knew, but all of us that knew, we were kind of told um, that we couldn't tell anyone,
Okay.
or we would go to jail,
Oh,
or it was our fault, or that our mother would leave us. So these were things that were being told to us. And even 9 is pretty young. For 9 is young still. I mean, I think 17 is young.
it is.
I mean, it's still like all of it, you're still developing. But so we were told these things, and so then none of us really said anything. I think there was a time when we had some courage to, every once in a while, I had some courage to stand up for another. But it takes a lot to stand up for another because you know you're going to get it later. When you're a young person, you know, it's very confusing. And, um, you know, stood up, but then it's like you just can't maintain that. Do you know what I mean? When you're a young person and there's nowhere else for you to go. And it was kind of like, Ruth, like it was like part of me didn't want this happening, but I also didn't want to lose my family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of, that's where the confusion stepped in for me, is like, I can stick this out because I don't want to lose my family. Where will I end up? And what this person is saying is true? What if it's my fault? What if I'm a bad person? What if I go to jail? And you didn't do anything as a little kid. So do you know what I mean?
Of course.
So it's kind of confusing, but you know, I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And Monica, you were saying that from when you were very young, you had a connection to your higher self. Was that a piece of what helped you survive all this, do you think?
You know, I really think I don't know, as a young person though, I had this awareness of a big heart. I don't know, I just always felt this really strength in my heart and love for other people, compassion, and not that I haven't hurt anyone or I'm not perfect by any means, but I felt that as an overall essence. And it was also confusing. So I do feel like that helps me. I feel like I just always felt connected to spirit. And we went to church really early, Catholic church, and we went a lot. Grew up Catholic, and I just always felt connected to Jesus, and the angels and Mother Mary, because Mother Mary's pretty big in Catholic religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt really strong. And something just said, you can get through this. You just keep going. I didn't even know young though what was happening. And honestly, Ruth, I didn't really even believe it or buy it, the whole thing, until a friend said once, maybe you were abused sexually. I said, no, there's no way that happened. That no one would do that. I remember the other stuff, but then at 24, um, I, I decided to get a lot of therapy and hypnotherapy, and then everything started surfacing in dreams, and memories just kind of started flashing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that maybe the psyche, or spiritually, I'm not sure how that works, but it was trying to hold it, to keep it together for me, or who knows, I might have committed suicide, or who knows, to where I could get to a place where maybe I could digest it and maybe get some help and stuff, because
Right.
it's so easy to suppress those really, really, really fundamental memories that they shake your ground. Like the sexual was probably that they all have a different way of affecting people. For me, that affected me a lot on a shame level, like shame and humiliation, and then boundaries for sure. But the mental was probably the hardest, because the mental was when I was older, and it was a lot, pretty much every day, because we lived with this person. He's now passed on, but it was brutal messages going into your head every day, terrible, terrible messages. Um, that almost feels like the hardest piece, Ruth. That I think now, being 49, I'm now starting to believe those weren't true.
Mm.
And it took me a long time to believe that maybe those were lies. Maybe I'm not a piece of crap, and he used the other word, or
Mm-hmm.
like finding shit in a magician's hat. like that. He said, what your worth is. And
Hmm.
you're like, you're, like finding shit in a magician's hat, or you're like as important as a pimple on an elephant's ass, and just made me look in the mirror and say, I'm nothing, I'm worthless every morning before middle
Oh,
school. And this was every, he might have missed some mornings because my mom wasn't working those mornings, but it was pretty strong messages. I guess, I don't, and then he was different when my mom was around. And, even telling you that much, Ruth, like, I just want to say something to anybody listening, that it took a long time, but I do forgive him. And I forgive him, and because I believe when we hold on to anger, even though it's important to go through it, I think it's really important to get that and feel okay, because everyone deserves to heal, and that anger is a big part of that. And but I do forgive him, and I no longer identify with what happened to me,
mm-hmm.
or define myself by what happened to me.
Right.
And that is where the freedom comes. Just so people know, the story, this is my story about it, but it's not who I am. It doesn't define me. And now, after years later, I do forgive him. But it was hard and it was long. Yeah.
Well, yes, long, every day long. Wow.
Mhm.
So, Monica, you were betrayed not only by
Mhm.
him, but frankly by your mother, because she must have had some idea, right?
Mm. Well, you know, honestly, I know my intention to share this is to help others, but I say, Ruth, it's really hard. It's hard to talk about, because it's
Mm-hmm.
still, even to this day, being 49, and my mom has passed on as well. But I love my mom,
Of course.
and even now I love my mom, and I forgive my mom. But yeah, my mom, it was tricky, Ruth, because my mom did know. I even told her of an instance that it wasn't me, and woke her up and said, "You've got to get out here." It was for another member of my family that was being hurt, and it was really hard. It looked like it could actually have ended his life, and I said, "You've got to help him." And my mom was a hard worker, and she was a nurse, and I also think my mom was looking for love too, and it was her, looking for love. And I think there was some part of my mom that was unhealed, and she did kind of say, "What did you see?" And I told her, and she did believe me. But I think my mom did try to help once. She did call a social worker, but then the person that was doing it said, "If you guys say anything, you know what's going to happen to you." And then when, the social worker came, we said nothing's happening.
Mm.
We were all really scared. I think one of my family members might have spoke up, but it was really hard, Ruth. It sounds like, you know, why wasn't she stronger? But it's so confusing. And then I think it confused my mom. And then my mom sometimes, I think she had an idea, and she did end up divorcing this person. But I think it's then maybe the thing that really struck her is when he actually struck her,
Mm.
that then she realized, okay, this was real. This is really happening. And then the kids weren't lying. Um, but I think it was honestly confusing for my mom. And it's so weird when you bring that up, even at this age, Ruth, that I still have this protective instinct for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have expected it to come up, but I just, yeah, I think my mom had an idea, but then it was just, she was the main breadwinner. She was working hard. It was like she has all these kids. I I think my mom made some mistakes for sure, Ruth. Yeah, but my mom, Yeah, it's quite confusing, but I don't know. I hope that makes some sense.
Well, of course. And
Yeah,
you and I've spoken, and really every person's situation is going to be different. Not only
yeah,
what they have to live through, but how they
yeah,
choose to respond to it, or how they're able to respond to it. And
yeah,
truly, no judgment can be cast on anybody who's gone through something like that.
yeah. I agree, and I really do. And I think especially when you're children and you've been, you know, boundaries crossed since the get-go. You don't know what's yours. You don't know what you can say, what you can't. You don't know if you have value or worth, and it becomes like, you know, it becomes like discernment isn't even a question. You're pretty much in survival mode. And as a kid, kids want to fit in. They want to find a group. They want to feel safe. And a lot of times, children that are abused, everyone's different, but it really does depend. But a lot of times I've seen, they want to just live a normal child, like not that there really is a normal, but a safe childhood. Go home to dinner and feel safe at home and have friends and play and have fun. This is what most kids want to do. I would
Right.
think, and I know I did. You want to play and have fun and be a kid. You know.
Of course. And Monica,
Yeah.
what was your survival mechanism?
Um, for me, let's see. There were a lot of stages to it, but I'd say that when I remember early on, like really young, like around the 5-year-old range, I remember I became extremely empathetic, empathic. My managing was my mindset was just I wanted to please and make everyone happy, and that doesn't sound very like managing, but it's really what I did. It's kind of where my head was. And then as I got older and I realized, whoa, this, I was definitely aware, you shouldn't be beaten and stuff. This is bad, but I don't know how to get out of here. So then, what it became was, then it became survival. So we were brought up in a home where there was a lot of abuse, but there was a lot of mental manipulation that we went through on a daily basis. So I learned and that just speaking for myself is survival. Like there was a lot of pitting against each other because that's how this individual learned to feel strong. If I pit them all against each other, it will create weakness. Um, and it was very sad. And to this day, a lot of healing in our family now, but there's still a little bit of that isn't healed yet. And you know, we were dealing with someone that was actually very intelligent when it came to hurting other people. And I'm assuming that he learned that from his growing up. I don't know about that, but I learned to work hard, um, try to be the best at everything I could be good at, because I didn't want to show any signs of weakness. So I worked really hard at everything I did. I had a lot of friends. I was really popular, so I made the outside world my safety zone. Like, you know, um, being the best I could, being nice to everyone. And I really did care about people, but I think a lot of that was also safety too, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and I've watched you with your own family, with your son and your husband and other people's kids because of your vocation. And you are one of the most loving people I've ever met. So
Thanks, Ruth.
I wonder if that isn't part of what held you together somehow, was knowing that there was love for you somewhere, someday, and here you are living it. Is that healing for you? I'm guessing it would be, but is that healing for you to have these amazing, loving relationships with your own family now? Does that help heal some of the past for you?
Absolutely. My husband, you know Kevin, and absolutely, Kevin is he is just an incredible human being. I mean, he's on a strong spiritual path his whole life. He's a very devoted person. He loves me unconditionally, and I don't know if I've ever felt that before. And we've been married now 23 years, and Ruth, his love for me made me realize what love really was, and his love healed me. I think his love and God's love
Mm-hmm.
healed me, because it's like I noticed in things I would do in the world, and I always saw mercy and grace, God's mercy and God's grace on me. And then I felt it, and I was like, oh my God, that's mercy. That's because I'll share a little more, but like Kevin's mercy and Kevin's grace and his love for me has definitely healed me. And my family loves me, and I love them willingly. And and then our close friends, like there's some deep love there. And yes, but I feel like Kevin and God have healed me the most. Like Ruth, one thing I want to share with people that are listening is, you know, when when you're violated like that, sexually for so long, and there's no respect for relationships, no respect for relationships or love or intimacy or any of that. When it came to and men, all my relationships, like with men, I've really struggled with being faithful, because it was very confusing in my head. Um, Pretty much every relationship, and then as I got older, I started realizing this is not what I want to how I want to be. Like um, this isn't what I want to be doing. Why am I doing this? It's like fear of intimacy. You learn how to break things up. You learn how to mess up things, because that's what you were taught. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
And and with Kevin, I really learned how to heal that, like heal that kind of thing, and heal how I want to be, and heal that type of loyalty and commitment, and that. So yeah, but Kevin's love has healed me so much, and he's an incredible person and human being. And God's love, mercy is a real thing. And so to answer your question, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the beautiful thing, Monica, is that so often in other families, the cycle of abuse goes from generation to generation, and you stopped that cycle for you and your family. I mean, your sons know nothing other than amazing love from both parents, so there won't be abuse coming down from their side. So that's a beautiful gift.
It is, Ruth. It's really amazing. And it's like, because it does a lot of times, it keeps going. And I don't know why. And you don't really know why, but I'm grateful that that just wasn't something that was in my mind at all. Like, like, you know, people say, and sometimes they say in statistics that if you've been abused, you pass it on. I think that can be true sometimes if you're not mindful, and if you're not on a healing journey, and if you're just not aware. But once you're aware of how much something you do harms another person. It can actually harm their entire life, and other people in their life. It's, I don't know if that was conscious when I was young, but I do know that I've always been like had this passion for protection of children, and just love of children and protection, and knowing like none of those thoughts were ever a thought of mine, to ever hurt anybody else like that. So I'm really glad that that was not my path, because that would be, I don't, honestly don't think I could live with myself if that was my path. So I'm just glad it wasn't. And given everything that happened, everything's different, but everyone's different. But given everything that I did experience, I feel so grateful to be where I am today. And the ways that I feel I messed up, and I got help for that and healed it, and am good now. But yes, I'm so grateful and happy to be able to love and be in a family that's really mindful and aware and healthy.
Absolutely. And Monica, you've brought up the term boundaries several times in this conversation. What role do boundaries play when it comes to healing from abuse, whether it's mental, physical, sexual, emotional?
Yeah, boundaries are so interesting because physical boundaries, most of us are very aware of that, or at least aware of it. Like, it's not okay for people to touch you. Of course, not everyone knows that, obviously, but that is the truth. Like physical boundaries, like your spatial awareness, being touched, being hit is not okay, being touched is not okay. There's physical, right? And those things, even just talking to people, and if they're too close, it's okay to back up, step back, and make more space for yourself. But anyone listening, Ruth, that has had these things happen that are similar to my experiences, we don't learn that. So we're not taught that. And so even if you're an adult, you still are kind of like, you've got to like mother yourself in a way. But boundaries are very important, and they're not just physical, but emotional, mental. Um, uh, Sexual seems obvious, but when you're grown up, just know that it's not okay. And I'm so glad in schools today they are teaching that really strongly now, that in fifth, sixth grade, this is not okay. You can't be touched. You can't. We didn't have that education when I was younger. But boundaries show up in so many ways, and they're so important to learn about them when you've been abused or have had experiences with abuse. And even if you haven't, but especially if you have, because they show up in many different ways, and they can affect every area of your life. They can affect even more mild ways that aren't like abuse, but like, overeating, overspending, becoming in debt, not knowing, like, obsessive compulsive kind of behaviors, or, things like that. And even with friends, you learn to discern, is this a friend? Is this a neighbor? Or is this a friend? Learning the differences between things. And in intimate relationships, it's huge. So abuse is going to, intimate relationships are going to be the hardest when it comes to people that have been abused, because it pushes all the buttons. It brings up all the memories, and you've got to be strong to hang in there, and you've got to have a strong partner to hang in there with you. But the boundaries play a really big role. So, I would encourage anybody that wants to learn about even ways they can affect you mentally and emotionally and socially. They're huge. What you tell people, what you don't, what is private, what is personal. What are they come in so many forms. Let me think of some other things I struggled with were, there's one thing, like, also when you're abused, you feel like oh, everything is your responsibility. So like boundaries, that would be more of a mental emotional area. If someone's not happy, I always felt like it was my job to make them happy. Um, that's a big boundary. It's not so much physical, but it's more mental, emotional, and psychic almost. And and it's that over responsibility piece is huge for people that have been experienced abuse. So just to learn what is yours, what's not yours, what's your responsibility, what's not your responsibility. It took me years to learn that, and so I don't know. Does that make sense, Ruth?
Yes, and something you said, Monica, was kind of surprising to me, and I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. You were talking about overeating and overspending as ways that people aren't respecting their own boundaries. Is that how you were
Yeah,
seeing
and
that coming up?
it's exactly. And Ruth, I never thought of it too much as a boundary. I just thought, oh, everybody does that. Everybody overeats and overspends and gets in debt, and it's just part of America or like whatever.
Right.
But then that's more honestly, I feel like it depends on the extreme of it, but for me, it was more of a mild. That meant I did a lot of healing to get there, to actually get to see that that was a boundary issue too. So, but when I noticed I felt unsafe or scared, um, even though I'm not overweight or anything, but I do tend to eat emotionally, and I would just eat. I wasn't hungry, and I would just eat. And then once I started being like, you know, yeah, that. So Ruth, I was crossing my own boundaries inside myself, and the boundary with ourselves is actually the most important one to learn about, because when we cross our boundaries and we lose our integrity, even if it's in a small way, which I would consider overeating if it's not like you're actually sick and diabetic, but like that's mild. It's still you've disrespected your own boundary, and that's what happened to the people when people are abused when you're younger. So it's almost like you're still doing it in a way. So learning how to respect your own boundaries can really change a person's life, because if you're disrespecting your own boundaries, you're probably disrespecting others' boundaries. But it doesn't mean you're hurting them, like abusing them, but it could mean like, I don't know. Here's an example, Ruth, that people might get. It's more of a subtle way. I had a show at this really nice place in a CD release party. I was a singer for a long time, and it was a wonderful full house, and I was very excited. And when a good friend that's a great singer came, and I didn't know she didn't like improv, and that scared her. She liked to know where she was going and where she was singing. And I kept saying to her, come on up, come on up. And there's a couple hundred people there. She had a bad day. I didn't know that. And she didn't like improv, which I didn't know either. And she said no. And I kept saying it because I thought it was like a nice gesture. Like
Right.
I was like sharing the stage with her. In my mind, I was being generous. So it was kind of funny. But she said no twice. And I still didn't like listen to her no. And that's kind of a way that I crossed, didn't respect her. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's more subtle, but it shows up because those kind of things can make you not have friends and people not want to hang out with you or be close with you. Or anyway, it's there's like, I feel like there's this big spectrum of learning mild boundaries all the way up to when people are abused, and there's this big spectrum. And but to have healthy family, friends, and relationships in life, I think boundaries are so important to learn what they are and how they show up in life.
Well, and something just came to mind, Monica, which is in order to be aware of your own boundaries, you have to be able to look inward. And I think sometimes people that have been through trauma, it's really painful to look inward. And sometimes it's just easier to keep focusing on outside of yourself. So a piece of that developing your boundaries is being able to look inward and be able to hold yourself and love yourself in order to see that those boundaries are okay and necessary.
That is such a great point, Ruth. It is so true. And that is such a great point. It's so true. It takes a lot of courage to look in. And one thing that comes up is anyone that's going through this and struggling in this way, to know that you're not alone. There are millions of us out there, and to surround yourself. Like, I started getting help in therapy once I started realizing how deeply this affected me. And then you feel like, okay, I've got support. I'm married to an amazing person that's very introspective. Like, start to surround yourself by help. If you've got a higher help, and that's the only way you can trust, because trust becomes a huge issue for people who have been abused. Trust is big, and they don't trust themselves, and they don't, most likely, definitely don't trust others, even if it sometimes looks like they do. Trust runs deep, and but I don't want to get off that topic. You said, yet they have to learn to look inward. It takes courage, so they need to recruit help, like people to help them and support them. And the other thing that comes up, Ruth, with that question is, a lot of times people that have been hurt in that way and basically been told it's your fault, this is happening to you, and you're the bad one, and things like that, so that they don't feel so bad for what they're doing, is then as you grow up an adult, you feel guilty, or I could say I felt really guilty when I drew boundaries and said no. When you draw boundaries, it makes you like you're a mean person, and you feel guilty. And then it's almost hard to over. Journey requires a lot of support and multiple people if you can, because you're right, Ruth. It's hard. It's easy to just keep like shopping and drinking, or just focusing outward. It in a way it's easier, but then it's going to hit a point for most people, if they feel like they're in a safe place, they're going to want to get better, because they're going to want to gather back those pieces of their lives that they want to claim back, and step in their power and claim their power back. Because for men and women both, we all need that to feel whole and live our lives the way we were meant to live them. But support is huge.
So getting the support, how can you begin to strengthen your boundaries?
Well, so what I did, and I just want people to know that it takes work. It takes courage, and it takes work. Just so people know, it's not, everyone's different, but it's not like a super easy road. But to start to strengthen them, becoming aware that there actually are boundaries is huge, because there are a lot of women, even my age, that still, and men, that don't know that, because they've been through the same thing. I can spot somebody a mile away that's had the same experiences. Maybe not exact, but there's been some violation, because there's a low sense of self-worth and self-value that just shows up in their words and their actions. And it's not to be judged, but it's an awareness. So becoming aware that there are boundaries, learning about them, looking them up. If you can hire somebody, if you can afford to hire a therapist, and check around with different ones, make sure you feel really comfortable with somebody, a therapist, but also a healer. Like, I work with a lot of people now that have had that happen, someone you feel safe with. Start to recruit that, and become aware there are boundaries, and that you are entitled to use them. And that's really important, that you are entitled to use them, because that's going to be the hard part. Even though people know, now they know there's boundaries, and now they're aware they've been crossed, then they're going to have to learn to heal their self-worth enough to use them. But these are the steps, and letting go of a need to please others, like initially. We, of course, in our work and our family to feel happy with us, and our work to be like helpful, but not to the point to where you will pretty much forget everything you want or feel to make somebody else happy. If you feel that way, it's important to begin to at least think about letting that go. And then once you notice, once people start noticing, I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel good, even if it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, religiously, because some people at churches go through that. Sometimes that has happened as well. But anytime you feel uncomfortable, just ask yourself, why do I feel uncomfortable? It's like, and if you hear your inner voice say, I don't want to do that, then don't override it anymore. So stop overriding as soon as you can. And it doesn't mean you have to be angry at somebody or get mad at them. Although anger is a part of setting boundaries, but at least start to listen and be aware that, what, the person can even say if they don't know why, I don't really know why, but I don't want to do that. I don't really know why, but I don't want to go. Or I don't really know why, but what you're saying, I don't agree with. Because sometimes when you're not trained and you don't learn it from your parents that you have a right to speak up, you have a right to say no, you have a right to draw, you don't even know why you're feeling bad. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah, so those are my steps, Ruth, to start, is surround yourself, get support, become aware of there are boundaries and you're entitled to use them, and try to let go of the pleasing initially to start, and then start to notice when you're uncomfortable and speak up and just start to say things, and the ball will start rolling. And then it does start to unlock memories too, though. So then you want to make sure you have help, because memories will start to come, and some of them are hard,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful, Monica. And we don't have time to ask another question, which is unfortunate because, of course, I have a lot of questions. But I am hoping that next week when we meet, that you will be able to talk about the connection to the spiritual divinity and how that's helped in some of the healing too. That, not only is it enough to seek help from a therapist and people that you love, but that there's other options as well. So I'm hoping we'll get to that this time.
Oh, definitely. That sounds great. I'd love to do that.
So Monica, we are out of time here, but I just want to thank you, because hearing your story and hearing that you came through it, and not only are you a survivor, but you are thriving afterwards in a love-filled life. It's such a gift to us to hear it. So thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Ruth. I really enjoyed it.
Of course. So to our listeners, thank you so much for listening in. It is always a pleasure to have you all with us. It is my honor to be among the hosts of International Angels Network and Enlightened World Network. And I look forward to walking with Spirit and you all next week. So good night and God bless.